What happens when a woman takes justice into her own hands after the system fails her? Extremities from 1986 turns the table on a brutal attacker, forcing audiences to question who the real victim is when revenge takes over.
Farrah Fawcett delivers a fearless performance in a film that blurs the lines between self-defense and cold-blooded retribution.
Is this a story of empowerment or a chilling descent into savagery?
Let's talk about Extremities and flesh out all of the moral dilemmas in this riveting film.
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation of $5 or more via our website at axiom.app, Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. The executive producer of this video is Cedric Douglas, who requested this film through Axiom Amnesia's Deep Dive on Demand program that we'll tell you more about later.
There will be spoilers.
And I also want to say a trigger warning to anybody who is going to be triggered by SA. So first, let's talk about the background of this film. It actually went from stage to the screen.
Oh.
So Extremities is based on the intense 1982 off-Broadway play by the same name by William Mastrosimone. Farrah Fawcett originally played Marjorie, the same character, in the stage play before reprising the role in the film. So let us talk about Farrah Fawcett for a minute, because for context, you have to understand that in the 1970s and into the 80s, Farrah Fawcett was the it pinup girl woman who was the blonde bombshell from that time. She was very much the it girl. She first really got famous with Charlie's Angels, and I think she was only on there for like one season, but she was one of Charlie's Angels and so Farrah Fawcett was, considered the hot chick of the day. But she had roles that didn't have the depth, right? As an actress, she was kind of, known for her beauty and not for her acting skills. And so this would be considered her career-defining role. And she took on Extremities to prove her dramatic acting chops. And so her fearless performance earned critical acclaim, and it challenged the perceptions of her just as a TV star. And we also have to note that she was previously in the TV movie The Burning Bed. And I think The Burning Bed might have been 1984, because it was like a couple of years before this. And The Burning Bed also was revolutionary because women who were battered women who were, the victims of anything, like we didn't get stories. First of all, their stories weren't even being told, but we certainly didn't get stories of vigilantism, retribution to their attackers happening. And in The Burning Bed, spoiler alert, what happens is, she plays a battered woman who ultimately winds up offing her husband in a burning bed, like she straight sets him on fire after he's, been battering her or whatever. And so the film also covers, I believe, because I saw this as a kid and I haven't seen it since, but it covers like whether she would be found innocent or guilty as a result of it, and the laws, right? All of these laws for women who are the victims of, domestic violence and whatnot. So, and whether they would be found guilty if they did something to the perpetrator. And this was one of the kind of first movies that covered that. And I'm not sure if it was based on a true story or not. So then we have this brutal and kind of unflinching story. And the film doesn't shy away from the psychological and the physical effects of the survivors of these types of, things that happen to them. And it's raw, and it's a raw depiction of, the violence and, and the revenge. And what happens in this movie sparked these heated debates about justice, victim empowerment, and morality, all mixed in there together. And y'all know I love a story where it has these moral dilemmas. And then we have James Russo, who plays the perpetrator. His performance was just like terrifying. There were people who, after this fact, did not really they found him disturbing. They didn't, it's like Mr. in The Color Purple and Danny Glover. They didn't like Danny Glover after this role. He played it so well. So then the ending is controversial. We'll get to that after the summary, but it is controversial. And unlike many revenge thrillers, it doesn't give you an easy resolution at the end of the film. And Marjorie's choice is questioned. And did she do the right thing at the end of the movie? And so we'll discuss that more in detail later. So let us focus on the cast.
So we have Farrah Fawcett, who plays Marjorie. We have James Russo, who plays Joe, who is the attacker in the film. And we have Alfrie Woodard, who plays Pat or Patricia, Diana Scarwitt, who plays Terry. So Terry, Marjorie, and Pat are roommates, and Joe is the attacker.
Right.
And I should probably look at the cast of these films before we watch them, because James Avery is listed as a security guard in the credits.
James Avery is who?
People may know him as Uncle Phil from
Fresh Prince
of Bel-Air. Yeah. But I don't remember seeing him, right?
I don't either.
Want us to cover your favorite movie ASAP? A one-time contribution of just $50 or more to Axiom Amnesia gets you a deep dive on demand, a 30-minute discussion on any film you choose.
It's easy. Step 1, send $50 via our website, axiom.app, where you can pay via card, Apple Pay, or you can pay directly via Cash App at $Axiom Amnesia. See the links below. Step 2, tell us your movie, email, the name you want to appear on screen, and what kind of deep dive you want. General, a specific character, a particular aspect of the film, etc. Step 3, watch your deep dive on demand with your name listed as executive producer.
Lock in your deep dive on demand today and hurry. Spots are limited.
This offer is not valid for filmmakers or distributors. Subject to availability and terms apply. All right, let's talk about a summary of the film and then we'll get into more detail. So as you know, we always break it down into the 3 acts. What will be a little bit different about this is the so-called summary. We're going to do a detailed recounting because the little bits that happen along the way are important to kind of how you take the overall film. So we have Act 1, and we'll call this the attack and the system's failure. So in Act 1, we have Marjorie, who's Farrah Fawcett, and she's this young woman, and she is ambushed. She's trying to go to this. Well, she's ambushed by this assailant, Joe, and of course, she doesn't know his name at this time. And he tries to SA her, but she manages to break away from him, and he tries to chase her, but she gets away. So she's traumatized. She goes to the police only to find out that they're just basically dismissive of her case since Joe didn't leave any physical evidence. They weren't looking for anything. So after all of this happens, Marjorie is feeling unsafe. And so she's in the house with her 2 roommates that she lives with that you mentioned earlier. And, she's just kind of hoping that everything will be okay. But they, go on off to work or whatever. And we also see that, Joe is about to track her down, and he's intent on finishing what he started, because one thing that Joe got away with the original attack is he got away with her wallet, so he knows where she lives. And so then let us talk about specifically what happens. So Marjorie is in this parking lot, right? And she goes back to her car because she was just trying to get some ice cream after she had worked out. And they were closed, so she goes back to her car. Dude is in the back seat, and he puts a knife up to her and stuff, and he makes her drive to a secondary location. And I was like, how is she driving a stick in a Volkswagen Rabbit? I think it's a Volkswagen Rabbit she's driving. How is she driving a stick with, this around her neck, and like her hands are not, you need both hands if you drive a stick.
She didn't have both hands?
I don't think.
I think she had both hands.
Because he put something around her neck or the knife. And so her hand was kind of going up to, one hand is up toward the neck. Well, how can you steer and shift the gears? But whatever.
Maybe he was shifting.
Shut up. So he places the belt around her neck, and then he, takes her to this remote area under a bridge at night. And I got to say, like, Farrah was acting her butt off in here because she started crying, and she's like, oh, so like, I believe her. I mean, in this moment, she's really pretty good.
Yeah.
And anyway, so she does fight back. She gets away, and she gets to a busy street, and she just hops in the car with this old couple, right? She's just like, help me. And then, she hops in the car with them, and they take her to the police station. So then the thing I thought that was nice was when she said what happened, she's like, I've been attacked or whatever. The officer's like, do you want a female officer? I was like, okay, check, so hopefully the police are going to act right, And so then she's giving her report to the female officer. And so the officer's like, so you complied, like you did what he told you to do, and you just went along with it. And Marjorie is like, no, I didn't comply. He put a knife to my throat and I did what he told me to do. But the female officer says, so you did comply then, like, you did what he said. And she's like, no, there's a difference. And she really puts her foot down here. Like, I was forced to do this. Like, don't try to say I went along with it to diminish what this guy did. Right. So the female officer just breaks it down to her. She's like, well, it all comes down to your word against his. And he will, he's going to get off. The female officer tells her that because it's one person's word against another. And Major is like, but he got my wallet. Can I get some protection? And the officer is like, well, yeah, of course you can get protection. Just call us if he comes back. Like, what? So how did you take that?
Just call us if he comes back?
Like
well, that's just that's how it works, right? What else are they to do?
Nobody is like trying to dust nothing for prints or, well, I think they did find her car and they were like, we're going to try to get some prints. But, it's just like they're really not looking for the person because they don't feel like.
It does. If you leave some DNA behind, you probably have hair and stuff that you could probably get from a person, right? If you actually want to do the job.
But it's the 80s, so they ain't doing routine DNA on nothing at that point.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So
fingerprints, maybe. Did he have gloves? So it's all circumstantial. Like, the problem with a lot of this stuff is that's really the case. And I think they're just overdoing it in the film by just stating it's his word against yours, right? To make it simple for the audience, right? But it's hard to say, but to actually get a conviction like that, if you don't convince the person to just flee or have them complicit in in pleading guilty, right? If you don't force them to plead guilty, then if you take it to a jury, chances are, I ain't gonna say chances are, it is possible that they might just get off. But part of it is, are you willing to actually prosecute? And then we have the issue of what we always bring up, the economic system and those incentives. Do you have the money to be going through this for every case? And a lot of times that dictates.
So Marjorie is pissed.
Which sets up the second half of the movie, right?
Yes. So she's pissed and she's just like, forget it then. And so she walks out and the officer's like, hey, don't you want to sign the report? We can't do anything if you don't sign the report. Major
you said like, you wasn't going to
do nothing anyway. So then we see that Majorie's like her wallet and the contents and stuff being thumbed through. And it's like the next day because it's light outside. Then it's a guy in a shed and a little girl comes up to the window in the shed and she's like, Daddy, Mom says dinner's ready. And dude is like thumbing through her wallet. So we're informed about who this guy is who did this attack. He's like married with at least one child. His wife is cooking dinner for him at the crib and you out here accosting women and just doing foolishness, So, but we know also, dun, 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 he's coming for her because he's looking at where you live. He about to come. So then we get to Act 2, right? And Act 2, the tables get turned on the attacker. So one day after Marjorie's roommates, Terry and Pat, they've left for work.
Marjorie or Marjorie?
Marjorie, I guess. One day after Marjorie's roommates, Terry and Pat, leave for work, Joe breaks into the home and he launches another assault. He forces her into submission. And then at this time, she manages to fight back again, and she blinds him with this can of insect spray. And in a desperate bid to survive, she overpowers him and traps him in the fireplace, binding him with different household items. And so Joe is now at her mercy, and the power dynamics shift. And Marjorie is no longer the victim as she contemplates revenge. Her roommates arrive and are horrified by what they see.
Yeah. The first half of the movie is a drag. I'm
to get to this point.
Oh my, come on. Because they show everything that happens.
And then let me tell you everything that happens. So Marjorie's with her roommates and then they're like, bye girl, we'll see you.
Well, this is
whatever.
more the second half. I'm talking.
Okay. Well, so this is Act 2. So I'm going to give you like a little detailed description and we're going to, discuss as we go along. Cause she's like, bye girl, and so her two roommates leave. She's by herself and the house is beautiful. There's like, she's got a beautiful garden outside, this big pane glass window. She got a whole bird and, pets around the house. So it's all tranquil even after these terrible things have happened to her, right? And so a guy comes to the house during the day and he act like he's looking for another man, but he opens the door. Like, who does that? Who comes busting your house and is like, hey,
he's like, where's Tony?
You know, and I know, right? And act like he's looking for another man and he won't leave. And this is the attacker. And he says, let's see who's the fastest this time. You know, so again, it kind of reminds you a little bit. It is a little cheesy the way it unfolds, sort of like the reveal scene in Duplicity, Tyler Perry's Duplicity that we just talked about on the Heit Cheri channel, where, you know, when the big reveal comes, then it's like dun dun dun, the person just turns from nice to nasty all in 1 second. And so he's like, let's see who's the fastest. And he begins to chase her around. And then he knows her roommates by name. And then it's terrifying because he's like, we got all day. Because he come in the early morning. As soon as they leave is when he shows up. So he's planning on, you know, basically doing all this to her. He picks out clothes for her to put on. And she's trying to get away, but he foils that, you know. And then he demands that she cooks him this meal and she heats up butter. And so we like, maybe she can get away by throwing the hot grits on him or something. No. And then he takes over and he starts actually, you know, physically assaulting her or whatever, and hitting her and smacking her and whatever, and tries smothering her with a pillow and stuff. Like, it is not looking good for her at all. And until she sprays this wasp killer on him and she gets the upper hand and she ropes him in a cord and all of that and beats him with a hot kettle. He was jacked up by the time she made a little jail cell in the fireplace and made him get up in the fireplace, and she put these bars in front and like, he was jacked up.
It's much tougher nowadays because you don't just have really long cords hanging around anymore.
I know.
There was a phone cord and
what
you
had
had those
today, an extension cord.
You're going to use your aux cable. You're going to use a little
cable.
USB cable that's 3 feet long.
You're going to try to use the cable from your cell phone, the one they give you, which is not long enough.
So that was a thing of the past, right? So when these advances in technology, it could make us a little, you know, more vulnerable to things.
Well, and also like, it can make us more or less, right?
Because the thing was, he snatched the cord, the phone cord, right? So now you can't call. But that very thing is what helped her to capture him.
Yes. And then like, if you think of modern day, then people have cell phones. If she could get to the cell phone, she could have called for help. So but from the point he rips the cord and disables stuff, you have no way to call for help in this house at this point. So
which makes it better for the movies in the past. The movies now, it's just always have to be, well, for some reason you don't have service.
You don't have a signal.
Very convenient.
How convenient.
Yeah.
And how often does it happen that you don't have service? In the early days of cell phones, it would happen all the time. But like these days, mostly the only time,
especially around where you live, right? You're gonna have service unless you're just way out in a remote area.
Yeah, like only times I've gone through where we didn't have service anytime in recent history is like when we've been on road trips. Yeah, and you know, we're in the boonies or something on, you know, on
one time I drove from California through you know, New Mexico, Arizona and stuff, and in the desert. It was a long time ago, but no service. In the desert, man, that was just like, come on, I just need to get to civilization.
I know. and to me, it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
That you know, but back in the day, in the 80s and the 70s, and even maybe into the 90s, you know, people went on road trips with cars that weren't even fully reliable. Yeah.
So we were taking a trip and my daddy, his car just the ran out of gas or something, right? And it was my mama, his sister, right, and stuff in the car, and he had to get out. This was in southern Texas, back, you know, way back, right? So it ain't the same times, right? This was when you could see KKK on the side of the road, right? So he had to get out, go walk, and find somebody's house and ask them if he could use their phone to call for help.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How long was he gone?
I don't know. It was a long time, but my aunt and my mama was like writing signs on using lipstick to hold up, and maybe somebody would stop to help.
Bruh.
Yeah, that's how it was back in the day, y'all. And it was just, I'm a little kid on side the road.
Were you scared? Do you remember if you were scared? Or you just felt like the adults are there?
No, I think I was scared because they made it scary, right? putting up these
They were
signs,
panicking.
help. You know
Oh
what
my
I'm
gosh.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, he had to just go out there and just call for
Look,
help.
the 80s was a different time. I'm
Bruh,
telling
it
y'all,
was
the
terrible.
80s was a different time. You know, it was a time where there was no GPS. You're saying
Nothing.
this, and it reminds me of times of like
Right.
being truly scared and whatever.
Yeah, you don't know if he's coming back, and then what if somebody do stop to help, and you're
it's
now
not help.
split up, or if
Yeah.
it is help,
Yeah.
you getting split up now, and then how do you get in contact with each other
Well,
after
child,
that?
I say, well, child, y'all, at least
Y'all got it good.
Look, at least your daddy was the one willing to walk, because in 2025, I don't know, they might have made the girl walk. She
Bruh,
might say, I'll
shut
stay here with the car
up.
because, you know, in case anybody comes. Oh, my goodness. But yeah. So we're on to Act 3, right? And let's call this justice or revenge. So Marjorie debates whether she's going off Joe or turn him in, or even just let him go, right? So as he desperately tries to manipulate her roommates that, you know, are initially unsure. So the first roommate who comes home is Terry. And Terry is just like, you know, what's up? So after the roommates both return and it's just, you know, it's a mess. And then they begin to realize, though, that Joe is like straight sadistic and that he is trash. But they're in this quandary because it's like Marjorie is like, they're not going to do anything if we turn it in. He got to confess. So she's not going to, you know, take him out if he confesses, but she's got to have insurance that he's going to wind up going, you know, being punished for what he's done, because she knows he will come back again. And he even tells her that, right? He's like, I'm gonna come back if you know, and whatever. And he says, I'm not going to get convicted, and then, you know, I'm gonna get you or whatever. So then the film winds up ending after he does actually confess to what he did.
Yeah.
And after she threatens him. And then, you know, she's like, I'll stay here. Y'all go give help, because this whole time they still can't call for help. They're at the house. So the two of them have to drive off. Terry and Pat, they drive off to go get help. And she's still there with the guy that she's, you know, got subdued and everything like that, but he's confessed.
Yeah.
And then the movie ends there. And, you
I was
know,
thinking,
she lets
like,
him live.
Yeah, I was thinking like they were looking like, okay, we're going to leave and let you handle him.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking was going to happen.
You know, but no, that's not how it went down. See, because also that is an element of like thriller that wasn't fully developed in, you know, right, you know, at that point in the 1980s, right? Because you get the thriller movies starting to happen toward the late 80s, the what I would call maybe the modern thrillers, like
Sleeping with the Enemy.
Yeah, Sleeping with the Enemy, and what's the
Fatal
one where she boils the
Attraction.
rabbit? Yeah,
Oh.
Fatal Attraction. That's where she boils the rabbit and whatnot on the stove. But like things like that. And so, but let's just talk about Act 3 in detail, though, so we can just hear how ridiculous stuff happened that he did. So, she tries to leave, because where we left off was where he sprayed her, where she sprayed him in the eyes. So he's subdued and everything. She runs out. She tries to leave, but her car is not there because she didn't let her roommate borrow the car. And the roommate's car is not working well, so the car won't stop. And when she comes back in, he's like, you can't prove a thing. And it's my word against yours. So again, he's saying the same thing the police were saying. And so she goes back in the house, and he's like, if they lock me up, I'm get out and I'm getting you. And so she pulls him into the fireplace, and like I said, made this mini jail for him. And then he freaks out, realizing that he's been kind of confined. And that's when Terry comes home. Terry wants to call the police. She's like, well, we got to call the police. What the heck, you know? And Marjorie convinces her to help her make him disappear. Look, Marjorie done went out in the garden and started digging a hole by the tomatoes. She is serious. She is just like, he got to go. And so she tells Terry, it's him or us. Just dig the hole is what she's telling Terry to do. But Terry don't want to dig the hole. So Terry's like, I'll stay in here and I'll watch this dude. Terry goes to the cabinet, and Terry gets out a big bottle of vodka and starts drinking.
Yeah. And he just starts working on her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like, yeah, you know, this is not what she's making it. It's not what Marjorie is making it out to be.
You're going to be an accomplice, he's telling her.
Yeah.
And then when that doesn't work, he tells her that Marjorie basically slept with her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And Terry doesn't fall for it. And but Terry makes it clear, she's like, I'm not committing complicity for you. You know, she's like, I'm not getting ready to be involved, because he has gotten into her head. right? And she doesn't want to be an accomplice to what Marjorie has decided has to happen to him, which is he got to go. And so then we see Patricia, the other roommate, return. Now, Patricia, that's Alfrie Woodard's character. And Patricia's like, what's going on? Okay, where are the police? And Marjorie admits that they didn't call because they're going to let him go from the police station. And so, again, Marjorie is still intent on offing this dude. Patricia is trying to talk to the dude and find out what's going on. Because, you imagine you come home and this dude is up in the fireplace, locked behind what looked like a mini jail cell, crouched down. His eyes are jacked up and he's in pain clearly. And your roommate is talking about she got to off him.
Yeah.
Like, this is chaos.
Yeah.
So then Marjorie's like, don't talk to him. He's mine, whatever. Like, so Marjorie is just off her rocker at this point and been pushed rightfully so to be into this point. And then Pat is like, he's a human being just like you and me. Now, Pat is a social worker, so she's trying to use some of that psychology to get Marjorie to let him go. And Patricia is like, well, what do you want from him? So she starts trying to psychoanalyze Marjorie at this time. And Marjorie said, I want a confession. And Terry is still freaking out about being locked up. She's nursing her bottle of vodka. And they need an antidote for the poison in his eyes. So they give him some bread to absorb the poison, but he's like, I can't swallow the bread. I need some water. And then we got Pat over here. And, I can't help in this time but thinking like how Pat is the one who is, she's the black woman or whatever. Like the black woman is fixing everything. Pat is like, give him some bread. We can't let him go blind. We got to, so she got to come and try to smooth over this situation. And how apropos given all that is going on in current events at this point in March of 2025. All right. So they send Terry to the store and to get the antidote. Terry's supposed to be coming back with atropine. And Marjorie's like, look, I'm going to give you time. You better be back here. I'm going to off him if you don't come back. And I'm going to off him if you bring the police when you do come back. And so then she says to Terry as she's leaving, she's like, and I'm going to off him and it'll be just like you did it. Right? Because she's playing psychological games on the roommate to get her to comply with what she wants her to do. Right? And again, there are no cell phones, so nothing can be done. And Marjorie tries to actually off the dude, and Pat is fighting to keep her off of him. Then Terry comes back because Terry's taking a long time. Well, the reason Terry was taking such a long time is because it requires a doctor's prescription for the atropine that is the antidote to this poison. But she comes back with something else that maybe could work or whatever. So then Marjorie, when she finally gets pulled off, when Terry comes back through the door, Marjorie is like, I should have crushed his skull with that shovel, right? And like you see her morphing into somebody who is not this, happy-go-lucky woman that she was in the beginning. And she's not the meek victim that she was toward the beginning. Like she has found her power and she is not playing. So then Terry snaps on Marjorie and she's like, haven't you caused enough pain? Now, this is wild as hell, because in a moment where this is the dude who is doing all this stuff, you have a roommate like, haven't you, the victim, caused enough pain? She says, you were alive, you didn't have the actual R word happen to you. And there's nothing you can do anyway. And then she confesses, Terry does. She's like, I got R-worded by my girlfriend's father, who and she says she has to see him repeatedly after that and pretend like nothing happened. She's like, I couldn't hurt anybody, so I just made believe it was a bad dream. And Terry's like, I'm not going to prison for you. And so we got to just stop and talk about this dynamic, because at first she seems crazy for being like, what's so bad about what happened to you? When it didn't even all the way happen. You're so traumatized. Well, here's my story. Like the big reveal of it is,
Yeah, I don't know if it hits that much, because it's more of a justification to not do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like something that's put out there to convince her not to do anything to him, right? But in all that's going on, we don't know if that's true. Just like, so the whole thing is, to me, that we don't even know if what Marjorie claims is true, right? So we got the guy's story.
The other characters, right.
Yeah, huh?
Well, because we saw what happened. So
we saw what happened, and we got Joe, the roommates got Joe's point of view, right? So they don't know if it's that she's actually distraught, and then somebody who just came over is somebody who she just snapped on, crashed out, and thought that he was the one who actually did attack her from the beginning, the first attack.
Right.
So then we have that aspect. So, but then it's like, so is Terry even telling the truth? Because maybe she's trying to manipulate, and it could be if she believes him, she still, no matter what she believes, she still may not want the possible consequences of what could happen.
So she could have been willing to say anything. Now, in this case, I do kind of believe, based on how she looks and is acting, I do believe what she says is true.
I don't know if she was already distraught just by seeing the guy, though,
that's
right?
true.
So,
and she was drinking too, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's could be true, but that's the whole point of this to begin with. Who do you believe? Right? And then when you got situations where people are thinking about the self-preservation and all of that, I'm going to always question it.
Well, I found it interesting how, people feel like, what will often come out is like this idea of a person, like these levels of pain and victimhood, right? Well, this happened to me and it was worse than what happened to you, so you shouldn't be upset about what happened to you. Yeah. Or you should just, isn't this enough? Because Terry is saying, haven't you caused enough trouble, enough pain? And it's like, look, Terry didn't ask this dude to do this thing. Terry didn't go find this dude and bring him back to the house. This dude came over here. But you're focused on Terry being the person Marjorie being the person causing the pain. Yeah, but it's about who
decides, right, what should happen to someone, right?
Yeah.
You got someone who is distraught, who is bestowing the punishment upon someone, right? Is that the right person in the right time to decide what should happen to a person who has done something, right? We get this question all the time. Like, if, let's say, even as a society or whatever, who should we decide how someone should be punished too? Right? So it could be, hey, this person is just like, yeah, I think what you're doing may be beyond what should happen to them. But even still, who are you to decide that?
Right. So,
right? Because even what I think as Terry should happen, what you're doing is beyond that, right? Because every individual really has their thing about what the punishment should be for different people.
Yeah. And, like part of my gut response to the way this dude was and what he did, like my gut response was like, yeah, he should be out there pushing up daisies in that, the hole that they dug. But when I analyzed whether if it was me, if I would have had the guts to do it, if I would have wanted to face the consequences for doing it, I'm falling on the side of, doggone well, you ain't trying to go to prison, even if it happened.
Right.
You don't want that to happen.
You don't want that. But what Terry said wasn't just about him. Marjorie was torturing her friends.
Okay, let us talk about that.
Yeah. So you come home, you see this and it's happening, and they're just sitting there pondering what's going to be the consequences for them because of something that happened to Marjorie.
And something that the choice Marjorie had. We are not a tribunal where we are deciding together what happens to this guy. Plus, up until later in the film, so, what happens toward the end is the guy confesses that he was going to off all of them.
Yeah.
He was coming to do it to all of them. But before this, when they're evaluating it, they're like, look, he was coming for Marjorie. That didn't have nothing to do with me.
But do you even believe that, right? Once you torture somebody, can you take what they say into the confession? We got all these things of Waterboard and Guantanamo Bay, and like people gonna say anything to get out of. And later on in movies, that's always been a thing. I just said that because they to get out of this situation, right? And one of them is what's the one with Samuel Jackson where he's a cop and it was like something bomb got shot. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. But yeah.
Tannenbaum. Dad.
Tannenbaum, yeah.
What movie is that? Why is it not coming into my head? Tannenbaum. Look, I got to know this now.
But that's what happens. Like, when can you rely on a confession that was gotten out of torture? Was it The Negotiator?
Yeah. I think it was The Negotiator, right? Where you have all of that and people saying, you know, a bunch of misdirection because you don't know who really done it.
Niabom, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So, but yeah, but The Negotiator, yeah, with Samuel L. Jackson, is the movie where this type of dynamic is going on, where people have self-preservation, they're trying to misdirect, they're trying to manipulate, and you don't know what's up.
Recent changes here on this platform are making it harder for you to see our latest videos and get notifications. To make sure you don't miss out on anything, we're building our own community, both on our website, axiom.app, and on Patreon, with free and paid options available.
Here's the deal. While you can still watch our videos on YouTube, much of our current catalog and many of our upcoming videos will become unlisted and only accessible to our Patreon, axiom.app, and YouTube channel members. We'll be posting links to these unlisted videos directly on Patreon and axiom.app, so you'll be the first to see them, if you're a member.
If you choose the free Patreon option, you'll still get access to some exclusive content like watch parties, where we watch movies together and give the commentary, and other special videos. But premium paid members will get full access to all of our exclusive content. No new account is needed to join our Patreon. Just log in with your existing social media account.
While some of you may find this announcement disappointing, don't worry. We have no plans to leave YouTube at this point, but you guys are our cousins and our tribe, and we refuse to let platform changes tear us apart. So help us stay connected. Join us on Patreon today at patreon.com/axiomamnesia. You can check the links down below or in the comments. So in this film, though, Pat is trying to, get Marjorie to open the cage that this guy is in and let her apply the medicine. So then he's begging Pat to take him to the hospital. Now Pat is like, we got to take him to the hospital. So he's in Pat's head too, appealing to her because he sees that Pat is a person who is going to have some empathy for what's happened to him. And plus, I don't think Pat really knows who to believe at this point either.
But even if you do believe her, do you think that a person should be tortured or a person shouldn't get medical attention?
Well, like back to what she said, he is a human being just like me and you. So Marjorie says that he can't leave until he confesses what he did. So then dude starts telling a bunch of lies and Marjorie calls him a liar. And then Pat says, let him talk. Just let him talk, and he says that him and Marjorie met at a party and they did the do, and that then he also busts out and says that Tony, who is the boyfriend of Terry, that he wrote Marjorie letters. And Marjorie, admits that he did write her letters. She never responded to those letters. So this is her roommate's boyfriend writing her letters,
do you believe her answer to that?
Do you believe her answer? Did she sleep with her roommate boyfriend or not? And, he goes on and tells, because at this point, the only people who know about the grave that's dug out back is Terry and Marjorie and the dude, Joe. But Pat doesn't know about this. And so he tells Pat, they done dug a grave for me out back. They're going to off me. And so Marjorie pulls the knife from his clothes to prove that he actually did attack her, because he had like a knife. I don't know. It was somewhere in his clothes, but behind his back. And so she's threatening him now with this same knife and saying all the things that he said to her when he was, attempting to SA her. And she's smacking him and whatever like this. And imagine her roommates are watching this like, what? What is going on? This is crazy. The roommates are looking on in horror. And she is like acting like she gonna cut his dingling off. And that's when he finally confesses with a knife to his throat that he came there to off all three of them. That's what he says. And then he goes on to expound on it. He's like, the first time I did it, my wife was reading the paper and she said how I got to fix the back door because I don't want no R word coming in here, and dude was clearly sick if, this was true. Like, bruh.
It reminded me of the movie Trap for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
The
Y'all need to watch
movie.
Trap. Y'all need to watch that M. Night Shyamalan. And it's streaming now. So everybody can mostly see it if you have one of these streaming services. So Marjorie agrees to let Pat go get the police, and Terry goes on with her, and then she puts old boy, back over by the fireplace or whatever, and it ends with her putting the knife down and waiting for the police. So yeah.
Well, he was balled up crying at the end, right? So then you got the, oh man, I gotta be sympathetic to this guy who I've seen do all these things, because it was like he was this tortured soul and he couldn't control himself.
Had you ever seen this film before?
Never seen it. Never heard of it.
I had seen it before. And again, see, a lot of these films from like the 80s and when I was a kid, like these films were running on HBO and other things over and over. So I remembered, I knew I had seen it, but I couldn't remember what happened in it. And then I remembered the part where he got sprayed in the eyes. And I was like, oh yeah, I seen this movie a bunch of times, you know, as a kid. And so, did you find the movie entertaining? Like, I don't think it was meant to be entertaining. I think it was meant to be.
Like I say, the first half, you could throw that whole thing away. Just give me the second half with the.
But you had to know what happened.
I didn't need to know everything. You could have shown me the first part where whatever happened in the car, he shows up, bam, they fight, you lock him up.
So Siskel and Ebert said.
It was one of the worst movies of 1986.
Now, of course,
I don't agree with.
I completely disagree with Siskel and Ebert, and I'm like, why would they say this? Because you know what? Maybe they were a little bit sexist. You know, they probably didn't really care about no story like this. Now, from a film perspective, is it like an Oscar-winning type of deal? No, but maybe it was more like what we would call Lifetime movie specials and whatever that became very popular in like the 90s and stuff into the 2000s, because all of the stories have to do with, you know, women snapping off or for whatever reason, and doing stuff to men,
right?
You know.
So one thing that I think is like a subtext of this movie. So you have where, you know, basically your autonomy, your freedom, you know, care for being a human, right, and all this, but you know, and what a person deserves, right? So then, but they have a cat, right, in captivity. They have a bird in captivity.
In an actual cage.
Yeah. And then they have a fish in captivity. And one of the things happened with all the struggle and everything is that the fish tank gets knocked over. And the fish gets free from their
free
their
enough
tank,
to breathe air and not
die.
Be able to survive.
Yeah. So you got all that going on, and at the same time, we're mulling over what rights and what a human
deserves
of varying levels,
and
of all of them. What does she deserve? What does he deserve? What do her
roommates
deserve?
What rights each of them should have to decide what happens in this situation?
Yeah,
all of that. You know, so yeah. But all right, so let's talk a little, you know, about some specific of the themes and whatever. So do you think that Marjorie's actions are justified? Are they self-defense? Or does it suggest that she like crossed this moral line?
Well, temporary insanity. Temporary insanity. She, I don't know. So part of it is self-defense, right? You locked them up and whatever. I don't think she necessarily tortured him after that. She was kind of just wondering. She was stuck in what to do next, right? She tied him up, locked him up so that he couldn't do anything to her or her roommates.
In the short term. And then she was debating about the long term, right? He goes and then he gets out because she's already had the police tell her that, hey, if it's your word against his, then he's not going to stay. And
we've seen how it played out with the friends, right? They didn't know who to believe. So that as that goes on, then it's maybe letting him go isn't a good idea. If I can't even convince my roommates and my friends who I talk to every day and who know me, then how is a jury or some DA or whoever going to be convinced?
And so here's the other question I have. In these movies with these moral dilemmas, and you know, earlier I was like, yeah, he should have been pushing up daisies, right? But what is about the idea that a person who didn't actually take a life should have their life taken for something that they did? You know, and I'm even asking myself this question, right? Because if we believe the notion that you did something, then something should happen to you of like kind. Well, like kind doesn't mean that his life should be ended.
Right.
Right. It means that what he did to somebody else should have happened to him.
And like Terry said, it was just an attempt. Twice.
But it's hard because like my heart doesn't feel like that. You know, my heart is like, you know, and I'm mad in the moment and I feel like the injustice that's happening in the moment. Now, if I'm logically thinking, am I going to say he deserves the like death penalty for this? No. But like there's the fantasy of I sure wish that could, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there's the part of you that wants to get retribution for the wrong that has been done, especially when it's so crazy and heinous like in this.
Yeah.
You know? So
And how much better are you if you want these terrible things to happen to other human beings?
and that's always the moral dilemma of it
Yeah.
all. That's why I like it. It makes me think about what my default setting is and how I should be altering that based on my creed and my morals, or the things that I say are important to me, right? I want to be living in line with that, not just doing anything and being like, but I believe that all lives are important, and I believe that, you could say all that out your mouth, but where the rubber meets the road, are you going to do actions that support your creed, or are you just going to be a hypocrite?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the legal system. What do you feel like the film's critique of the legal system, the failure to protect the victims of this type of violence? And do you think that Marjorie would have acted differently if she had faith in the system? Like when she went to the police station at the beginning, if they were like, we're looking for him. Don't worry,
When you talk about the public's relationship with law enforcement, it's always basically that they want to have a good relationship, right? So all you got to do is be like, all right, we're going to find this guy, and then she's out of your hair. You know what I'm saying? Because you just want the relationship to be good. So and that's all that's needed for the trust. It's just that interaction.
But they weren't. So my default is to say they weren't willing to do that. But maybe the fact that it was a female police officer, she was trying to give her the real deal to manage her expectations. Like, look, honey, we ain't going to find him probably. And if we do, it's still going to be your word against his and nothing is going to happen. And maybe she feels that is important because, to manage the expectation out the gate rather than to mislead, because it would be misleading if you pretended like y'all was going to do something and you didn't,
Yeah, but like when it comes to the critique of the, what the film is saying about that, I think it's saying that they just to plainly be like, when it comes to crimes of this nature, then they're really not handling it.
So how, let's talk about the power dynamic. Obviously in the beginning, Joe had all the power. He knew where she was. He could physically overpower her. He had a weapon and she didn't, all of this stuff. But then when the tables are turned, it's flipped, right? But does this reflect like a larger societal struggle between victims and their abusers? Because, most of them don't get the chance to flip the table and flip the script like this. It's just something happens to you and you got to deal with the psychological impact. And even after the event, that person still has power over you to some degree, generally speaking, because you're thinking about it. It's on your mind. They probably ain't thinking about what they did.
Yeah, but so one of the things about it is just because he got her wallet or whatever, is it typical that somebody's going to show up at the house? And in this case, it just happened, right? It actually did happen.
Which is why I feel like he was just stone cold crazy, because we know that he knew what the police knew, which was that if it's the whole your word against theirs type of thing, that he wasn't going to get prosecuted or even found probably because of what he did. So there was no reason, actually the sane thing to do would have been to just lay low and leave it alone. You showing up over there increases and them turning up dead increases the chance that they're going to be looking, because they're going to be looking for you for a murder probably.
Yeah.
Of 3 people, versus just an attempted, R word.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
This kind of conflates the two, right? So you got the people who would do that, and then you got, is he a serial killer? Right? And does a serial killer have to be somebody who is, assaulting in another way?
Does, Joe, he attempts to manipulate everybody in there, right? He attempts to manipulate Marjorie and both of her roommates. Does this somehow connect to how real life abusers do? How they exploit their power and make other people doubt what they're doing to maintain control. I think it's reflective of it. I think it's reflective of people who are up to no good, let's say, across the board, whether they're doing this type of thing or something else. The idea of triangulating people and look, how many times I have to use the word duplicitous and duplicity in 1 week after we've covered Tyler Perry's film. I see what you did
He's
there, Tyler Perry.
influencing you
He has influenced negatively. The movie was a negative influence, but the use of the word "hey," it's never bad to, incorporate new words into your vernacular. Duplicitous is not one that I would use super often, but it wasn't like it was the first time I heard the word. But anyway, yeah, he's saying one thing to one person and another thing to somebody else to, kind of manipulate. And all of them maybe are doing, well, I don't know if we can say the roommates for sure are doing it, but we know that maybe Marjorie is doing it too. Not maybe, she definitely is, because she was definitely trying to manipulate her
she
roommates.
didn't tell her roommate about the letters or anything.
Nope.
So.
Nope.
Yeah.
And we don't know if she actually did. We don't know if she actually did sleep, or do have anything go on with her and the roommate's boyfriend. We don't know, because back to what you said about when we covered Devil in a Blue Dress, which is, available to our YouTube channel members and our Patreon premium members right now as of March of 2025. We don't know. In that movie, there's this scene where Denzel's character sleeps with a woman who is like the lady of a guy who he interacts with. And, your assessment was it depends on how you feel about that act. If you think it's wrong or you got a problem with it, then, that's going to be how it informs how you view that character. But because Denzel is viewed as like a good character in the movie, it creates a conflict if you think that that is a bad act, right?
Yeah.
So when good characters do bad things, in this case, Marjorie, who is trying to be painted as a good character,
right.
Could she have done a bad thing? Because, good people do bad things sometimes.
And if she did do it, does that even matter in all of this?
In this context, right? It has zero to do with it. Oh,
but
and I should add,
if you're in the moment, then you start to this actual act against you, right? Mm-hmm. She may have had something terrible that happened to Marjorie, but Terry would have had this terrible thing that happened to her by Marjorie, right? Mm-hmm. So then it's like, okay, this is more about what happened to me.
And how, and what happens,
and how we be like, somebody ain't my friend because they did something. So now you got no attachment to her, but this negative thing.
Mm-hmm. Know someone who's obsessed with movies? Surprise them with the ultimate gift, a personalized 30-minute Axiom Amnesia deep dive on demand on their favorite film. For just $50, they'll get exclusive insights and see their name as executive producer. Get yours today at axiom.app. What Marjorie says is the reason he knows all this info is because he's been stealing their mail.
Joe said.
Joe, yeah, or Joe.
Yeah.
But Marjorie says it too. He was taking our mail. That's how he know. So the roommates seem to believe her, but some of their actions, make it clear that either they don't fully believe her or they completely disagree with her approach on how to resolve this. And they're trying to work to a different end, which requires some level of manipulation on their part to be able to get the outcome that they want, not that Marjorie wants, because they're not trying to kill this dude. Especially, I don't think they'd be trying to kill him even if they knew from the jump that he was coming to kill them. But everybody looks at this like this is Marjorie's problem. Even while he's up in this, chimney, up in this cage that she's made for him. So, yeah, I mean, the film is just full of like these moral dilemmas and whatever. But do you think that the film would have been received differently if it was made today? Like, how have societal conversations around, essay and self-defense and justice evolved since like 1986 when this film was made? Yeah,
so I think, especially with all the negative reviews and stuff from the time, it's just like, we don't care about a victim getting revenge.
Mm-hmm. This is not a good story and they don't deserve revenge, so screw them.
It's a terrible story.
I think that the movie would be championed. It would be cheered today. And as we have seen with many other like movies that have been made, and you could probably look on Lifetime Movie Network and find plenty of them, right? Where the woman, this woman or any, person who is a victim takes their power back, so to speak, and actually gets revenge. Or most of the time the movies like position it where there's not a clear choice because the person who's crazy is so crazy that, in the struggle, they wind up falling on the knife, or in the struggle, the gun goes off and they, so it's always able to be like the responsibility for what happens still can be laid at the feet of the person who's the perpetrator. In this, if she had done something to him, it would be clear that she made the choice to do it versus these, accidental things that happen during a tussle in other films where they let the victim off the hook.
Or like they're clearly coming for you in the moment and you got to take the shot.
But justice, I think, has evolved. It hasn't evolved enough, but it definitely has evolved. I think it would be championed. People would look at her like a hero. And this is just one of those things where movies, the first of these movies, they start to turn the tide on changing public sentiment, along with the different laws. Because, back in the day, you still had like this wasn't domestic, but I'm just kind of thinking of domestic stuff where, back in the day, the laws were if the woman or the man, but mostly the woman, if she didn't want to press charges and whatever, that there was nothing we can do. Like nowadays, that's not the rules in a lot of places. It doesn't matter. If y'all been over here fighting, somebody got to go.
Yeah, you go to jail and we don't need you to testify, right? It ain't your word against his word. It's like our word against his word.
Yes. And, but we saw that with Gabby Petito. Y'all remember Gabby Petito, the van life young lady who wound up losing her life to her boyfriend. And the police had pulled him over because he was doing some stuff to her. And she was the one who wound up going. That was nuts. He spun that. And she was the one who wound up spending the night away while he got to go back and be in the van and what have you and so on and so forth.
Yeah. There was some criticism of the cops, but then basically nothing happened. Right? Like, and we know what happened. We got hindsight.
Yep.
We know who the abusive one was, right? But somebody ended up dead, and it's just like, they pretty much did their job. That's how it's supposed to go.
Yep. And they're like, well, every so often we lose a person, but 9 times out of 10 it'll be all right. That just is, it's like a numbers game, but like when it's a life, it's a different story. You know? So yeah. So what do you think? Did she do the right thing in the end, letting him, forcing the confession and then saying, okay, that's good enough and I'm going to go with the legal system, or should she have often? Go to the comments and tell us what you guys think. What do you think, Heit?
What do I think? They should do the right thing? Yeah, because how much negative? All right, so I'm traumatized. All this happened. I do this thing. I'm getting further traumatization. Is that a word?
Further traumatized.
I'm getting further traumatized because now I might be spending the rest of my life in jail doing whatever. In prison.
I do think in 1986, she probably was going to get convicted. Now, in 2025, they not even bringing charges in 2025, more than likely, But
and it kind of depends on how much time. She probably wouldn't have done the a long term like that. Probably not life, maybe. I don't know. But it just depends.
But in 1986, they're going to be like, going to jail for, 20 to life.
Yeah, but if you would have had some crack on you at the time, you would have got double.
You never going to get out. So, but, I want to thank the executive producer, Cedric Douglas, for reminding me of this film and for giving Heit the opportunity to watch the film for the first time, because I do think it's important to see the evolution of films like this. Yes. And this really was one of the first ones. So thank you so much for having us watch this film. And we hope we have done it justice with this deep dive on demand.
If you made it this far, type "do it" in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around.
And be sure to check out one of the videos that's on the screen right now. And also be sure to go to axiom.app and check out the videos that we have there, where we have the most recent videos from all of our channels in one place. And you'll be able to link back to YouTube just by clicking the thumbnail there. And also check below, y'all, because we got merch.